If it's Wednesday, President Trump is set to speak on the economy any moment now after urging Americans to have patience with his tariff agenda, as new data shows the U.S. economy shrank last quarter because of it. Plus, we're tracking multiple new developments in key court cases that could determine the future of the Trump administration's immigration crackdown, as the president says he could bring a mistakenly deported man back from El Salvador, but won't. And Democratic leaders blast President Trump and what they're calling, quote, 100 days of failure. I'll talk to a member of the Democratic Party leadership about what's next in their fight against the president's sweeping agenda and whether anyone is listening. Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Gabe Gutierrez in Washington as consumers, policymakers, politicians, and investors digest the news today that the U.S. economy is contracting amid the uncertainty of the president's trade agenda. The trading day on Wall Street just ended moments ago. The Dow initially fell more than 600 points on the economic news, but it rallied through the close, ending the day in positive territory. Since Trump's inauguration, U.S. stocks have fallen about 8%. It comes after this morning the Commerce Department reported initial data showing that the economy shrank by 0.3%, the first quarter of negative GDP growth since 2022. The decline was largely fueled by a huge imbalance between U.S. exports and imports as companies tried to scoop up as many foreign goods as they could before the president's tariffs kicked in. The president reacting to the news on social media, blaming his predecessor and urging Americans to be patient. He then echoed those comments while also touting what he says is the underlying strength of the economy, if you strip out some of the impact of his tariffs. Here's the president speaking at a cabinet meeting earlier today.
You probably saw some numbers today, and I have to start off by saying that's Biden. That's not Trump, because we came in on January, this is the quarterly numbers. Core GDP, removing distortions from imports, inventories, and government spending, was up plus 3% when you add it. We had numbers that despite what we were handed, we turned them around, and we were getting them really turned around. These are quarterly reports. We took over on January 20th. The tariffs haven't kicked in yet. I know that, and I don't want this to happen.
Notably, President Trump also seemed to be laying the groundwork to protect himself politically from any negative headlines when the next GDP report comes out.
So this is Biden, and you could even say the next quarter is sort of Biden because it doesn't just happen on a daily or an hourly basis. But we're turning it around. It's a big ship to turn around, and we're going to have the greatest country financially in the history of the world.
Those comments come amid new warning signs for the economy. Officials at the Port of Los Angeles warn that shipping volume could drop 35% next week as the 145% tariffs on Chinese imports start to take hold. And the Conference Board is reporting that the consumer confidence fell this month to its lowest level since the pandemic. Despite those red flags, President Trump is vowing to push forward with his economic agenda, arguing that the American people elected him to enact these sweeping changes.
People are worried, even some people who voted for you saying, I didn't sign up for this. So how do you answer those concerns?
Well, they did sign up for it, actually, and this is what I campaigned on. I said that we've been abused by other countries at levels that nobody's ever seen before. We were losing $3 to $5 billion a day on trade. We won the popular vote by a lot. You know, we had a tremendous campaign. I said all these things during my campaign. I said, you're going to have a transition period.
But that's not what he was saying on the campaign. As a candidate, Trump spoke often about an instant recovery when he took office, not about prolonged periods of transition or negative growth. And for now, for more on all this, I'm joined now by NBC News business and data correspondent Brian Cheung, NBC News senior White House correspondent Kelly O'Donnell, NBC News correspondent Steve Patterson, who's at the Port of Los Angeles, and CNBC senior economics reporter Steve Liesman will be with us in a moment. Brian, I want to start with you. Take us under the hood of this GDP report. Was it a good or bad report for the state of the overall economy?
Yeah, and by the way, GDP stands for gross domestic product. This is the most trusted measure of how much an economy grows. And what we saw from this report earlier this morning, which again is published by the government in the form of the Commerce Department's Bureau of Economic Analysis, showed that we had a contraction of economic activity in this country, down 0.3%. That is the first negative print that we've seen on a quarter of growth in about 3 years. So again, what is kind of underneath that figure? Well, it seems like most of the drag on economic activity was due to a surge in imports. So these are companies that essentially pull forward any sort of orders, let's say for toys that could be, put on shelves later on this year. They wanted to get ahead of those tariffs, likely ahead of January 20th. That's a big reason why we saw the negative contribution to GDP, even though consumer spending on investment, as you could see on that chart ahead of you, were indeed in the positive. So it does seem like most of the economic activity, that was really on the negative side was due to the pull forward of inventory, as opposed to more kind of core parts of economic growth, like the way that consumers spend and the way that companies invest, as well as governments spend. Again, not necessarily a red flag, but of course that negative print is catching a lot of attention, because if you get two in a row, that can, by some definitions, be what some would consider a recession game.
Brian, I want to pick up on that point of consumer spending. We've been hearing over the last several days from the administration, specifically the Treasury Secretary Bessent, that they're shrugging off these sagging poll numbers when it comes to the economy, because they say the data is still looking good for them, that consumer spending is still high relatively. So how much do we know whether consumer spending may have been juiced by people moving up planned purchases on iPhone, cars, for example, to front run these tariffs?
Yeah, well, look, on the import side, which we just talked about, that's companies that are basically trying to put in as much orders as they can and try to get things stateside as early as they can to get ahead of the tariffs. But on your question about whether or not consumers are doing the same, are people choosing to buy a vehicle? Are people choosing to buy a new washing machine to get ahead of steel and aluminum tariffs or auto tariffs? It's not necessarily clear based off of the data that we're seeing right now. The data still looks, by all standards, relatively okay. By some measures, the personal consumption expenditures, which is a proxy for consumption as measured by these statistics, by GDP, were below estimates. But again, they were still positive, and there's nothing necessarily about that specific side of the GDP accounting that would suggest that we are in a recession. The consumer does account for about 70% of all economic activity. So if that were to contract, that could be trouble. But we're not seeing it yet, Gabe.
Brian Cheung, thanks for walking us through that. Brian, thank you. I want to turn now to Kelly O'Donnell at the White House. Kelly, President Trump is urging patience on the economy, as we mentioned, and downplaying the potential effects of empty store shelves. So walk us through what he's saying today.
Well, one of the things that is striking is to sort of measure how the president has been adjusting this. He certainly talked about tariffs broadly during the campaign, but as you pointed out, he did not do a lot of preparing the public for what that could look like in the real world impact. And now he's doing a bit more of it. And it was striking today to hear him talking about one particular sector of the economy, and that is toy sellers. Obviously, the Christmas holiday season is, in terms of the retail landscape, not that far off. And planning will need to be done on that. And the president seemed to reflect how the toy makers have a real issue, because so much of their product comes from China. Very different than automakers, which are a smaller volume, much higher price point, and so forth. For the toy makers, it is lots of pieces. They are typically lower cost, but very expensive to be sustaining that 145% China tariff. So what really stood out today in his very long cabinet meeting is where he hinted that American children might have to do with less in terms of presents under the tree or for birthdays or special occasions, because there would be an impact on the cost from China. Here's a portion of what the president said.
They made $1 trillion with Biden, $1 trillion, even $1.1 trillion with Biden selling us stuff. Much of it we don't need. Somebody said, oh, the shelves are going to be open. Well, maybe the children will have $2 instead of $30, and maybe the $2 will cost a couple of bucks more.
A couple of bucks more. Well, a 145% tariff is arguably a lot more than a couple of bucks, and that, of course, is paid by the importing companies, some of whom are talking about the fact that this is a crushing level of cost for them that they had not prepared for. But trying to sort of shift the expectations for the public. Now, little children are not probably watching the cabinet meetings, but they certainly ask their parents for the gifts and the special things that they want, and moms and dads will have to adjust to higher costs. So is a doll or a toy that goes up significantly in cost due to tariffs, is that something that families will be able to sort of absorb for those special occasions coming up? That's a real tonal shift from the president saying, effectively, be prepared to do with less.
Yeah, certainly, Kelly. That was very striking from that cabinet meeting. Kelly O'Donnell, live for us outside the White House. Kelly, thank you. Now turning now to Steve Patterson, who's outside the port of Los Angeles. Steve, what are port officials seeing right now in terms of the imports from China?
You know, Gabe, it's really simple. 145% is simply too high for some U.S. companies. So they're altogether either pausing the amount of shipments that are coming out of China or altogether halting them, which is resulting in the numbers that we're reporting now. When we spoke to port officials about a month ago, they were estimating anywhere from 10 to 20% in a reduction of cargo. Now the estimate, as you mentioned, for next week, year over year, 35%. That number is unsustainable. It translates into the month of May, where they expect ship traffic to be down about 25%. And that bleeds into every aspect of the supply chain, the suppliers, the haulers, the truckers. All of these businesses are now affected. And the smaller they are, the first they will be hit. The first wave is always the people who can handle it the least. And that's what we're seeing as far as small businesses. That will eventually translate to mid-level retailers and some of those big retailers. As you mentioned, though, the big retailers able to push through their goods first, upfront those goods when they realized that Trump had been elected and that these tariffs were going to take place. So they upfronted. But that sort of bubble has now burst, and we're starting to see the results of it. What they're hoping is that that doesn't translate to store shelves and then consumer spending, which would spiral the economy. Gabe.
And Steve, you mentioned the reaction there from businesses, small businesses, larger retailers. What, though, what's the reaction from officials at the port? What are their biggest concerns moving forward?
Yeah, jobs, Gabe. I mean, everything in the port, really in the larger community, especially here in San Pedro, is dependent upon the cargo that comes in. A lot of the hourly workers, including the truckers, again, the haulers, even the longshoremen that work the port, and there are 15,000 of them, 54%, living in the larger community about 5 miles in circumference from here, are worried about not having the hours needed to support and provide a livelihood for their families. So we're going to see a reduction in hours, of course, no doubt about that. The port CEOs are saying we're holding the phone on the possibility of maybe large-scale layoffs, but layoffs will be coming if there is no solution on the table for these tariffs. Because, again, 145% is just not sustainable enough, especially when half of the business done, both imports and exports for both of the ports here, these massive ports here in Southern California, 50% of them are business with China. It's just not a sustainable business model. Gabe?
Steve Patterson, live for us in California. Steve, thank you. I want to turn now to Steve Liesman from CNBC. Steve, what do policymakers take away from this GDP report? Because their biggest fears are a contracting economy and rising prices, and this report had warning signs for both.
Yeah, it did. So I think for most people right now, this one is not the one that is the one that we're worried about. That's coming next. We know we had this surge in imports ahead of the tariffs, and that ended up taking a big chunk out of GDP. We also know that we had American consumers were buying a lot of cars and things ahead of time, again, to try to beat the tariff. So this report is sort of a wash. Next report, next quarter, might have a similar amount of noise in it because you get a snapback from all the stuff that happened in the first quarter. So what people are looking for is, well, what's going to happen in the third and fourth quarter this year? And that's where we see a pretty serious downgrade to the economy. Before President Trump took office, there was pretty good optimism. Our survey showed an expectation of 2% growth for the third and fourth quarter, or say average for the back half of the year. Now we're looking for less than 1%, kind of teetering on the negative or the zero number.
And Steve, okay, so you talked about the third and fourth quarter could be problematic. Why don't you clarify the timeline there for our viewers? Because President Trump keeps urging Americans to be patient and wait and see until these tariffs actually take effect. So when will those tariffs fully take effect, and what's going to happen when they do?
Well, I'm not a mind reader, and certainly not a mind reader of this president, so I don't know the answer to that. We have been back and forth on these tariffs. There have been days when you've had tariffs on and off on the same day. And you needed as Justin Wolfers joked one day, an intraday tariff tracker to understand where these tariffs, were they on, were they off. We just yesterday got some relief for the autos. What seems to be happening is what I call clean up in aisle 12 economic policy, is that things keep being thrown off the shelves, and then the president has to go back and ex post, or his people have to go back and clean them up. This is the opposite of the way most economic policy tends to be made, where you might say, okay, we're going to put tariffs on the auto industry. Let's talk to the automakers and find out how they might be affected by this and see if we can mitigate the worst of a policy that we're putting together. What happens in this case is they put the policy on, they realize that it's a disaster for a certain industry, then they go ahead and they somehow ameliorate or change the policy. So I don't know. Nobody knows. There's some period of time here. They're negotiating these deals. They say they're close to deals. We haven't seen any deals. There's no progress that we can see from China, which is the big one. Some of the other ones with the Europeans, we don't know how that's going to be. So this is the uncertainty that has really frozen business. They're not firing. We haven't seen that in the data yet. But also the hiring may be muted as well.
Yeah, a lot to watch over the next coming weeks and months. Steve Liesman, senior economics reporter for CNBC. Steve, we always appreciate your expertise. Thank you. Pleasure. And coming up, Democrats marking what they say has been 100 days of chaos, cruelty, and corruption from the Trump administration, and promising a plan to fight back. The second highest ranking Democrat in the House joins me next on what that plan might look like. Plus, dissension in the ranks. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth proudly axes a Trump-era Pentagon program that was backed by multiple members of the administration and touted by the president's daughter. You're watching Meet the Press now. And welcome back. While President Trump marked his 100th day in office with a rally in Michigan last night, Democratic House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries marked the milestone with a press conference this morning here in Washington, where he called the Trump administration a disaster and accused congressional Republicans of capitulating to the White House.
Donald Trump and his sycophants spent yesterday bragging about the speed with which they've moved during these first 100 days. They're right. Never has a president failed so spectacularly, so often, so quickly as Donald Trump. Republicans in Congress could put a stop to this insanity at any time. Since they won't, next November, we will.
And joining me now is Massachusetts Democratic Congresswoman and Minority Whip Katherine Clark. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining us. We just heard Leader Jeffries criticize the president's first 100 days in office right there and say that you'll stop him next November. So is that the plan right now for countering the president? Wait until November of 2026?
Oh, thank you, Gabe, for having me on. And let me tell you, we are not waiting till November. We have a strategy to meet there, as you put it at the top, the chaos, corruption, and cruelty of this administration with 3 C's of our own. So our strategy is to fight them in the courts, here in Congress, and with community. And what do I mean by that? One of our first things we had to do is with these illegal, unconstitutional executive orders, rifling through our personal data, dismantling programs like Social Security that people earned and rely on, we had to sue. And we have joined with our Democratic AGs and outside groups in bringing over 217 lawsuits, and we are winning. We have been able to secure injunctions in close to 90 of those lawsuits. So that's step one. Step two is to use every tool we have here in Congress to fight back, to make them put up their votes. If they are going to cut Medicaid, take away health care from millions of Americans, they are going to do it without Democratic support. And third, is community. It's mobilizing. The power always resides with the people. And that is why we are holding town halls, shadow hearings to hear from witnesses they won't call here in Washington, making sure that we are out talking to voters across this country in blue districts, red districts, and purple districts to make sure that they know what is on the line for them with this administration and this House GOP, and how we have a different vision for the future that includes them.
Congresswoman, I want to get your reaction to what we just heard from the president that we played a little earlier in the cabinet room today, talking about the possibility that Americans may have to deal with either shortages or higher prices on toys this Christmas. It was a soundbite that seems to be getting a lot of attention. What's your reaction to that?
I mean, it is so outrageous, it's really hard to put into words. And maybe if it was just saying whatever he said, that kids may have to only have 2 toys instead of 30, the real point here is, though, that's not what he's talking about. He is also taking away Medicaid. That is the insurance plan for half of the children in this country. He is looking to strip away school lunches. He is looking to take away the SNAP program that feeds primarily hungry children. He is defunding public schools. He is closing childcare, taking away Head Start. So his vision for children in this country can only be viewed through the lens that with his tremendous personal wealth, he has no idea what an American family faces, the struggle that they are having right now, and he has no problem betraying what he said he would do, which is cut costs for them on day one. He has done just the opposite.
And Congresswoman, Democrats, at least according to public polling, have struggled to really get their message across, at least in these first 100 days of the Trump administration. Democrats have latched on to attacking the administration over due process. Part of that has been the controversy over the deportation of Kilmar Borrego Garcia. There's a report today in the Bulwark that Leader Jeffries, though, is now discouraging additional trips by House Democrats to El Salvador. Is that true?
Listen, here's what I can tell you about our message. Our message is rooted in the American people. So first, yes, we are laser focused on the economy, on making sure that we are protecting Social Security, veterans benefits, Medicaid, making sure we're helping drive down the costs, expanding housing. But we also can talk about what is happening with this administration to our constitutional rights, and that includes due process. When we are seeing an American president threatened to expel American citizens without due process, send them to a foreign country to an unknown jail term, we should all take that seriously. And that's the implications of the cases of alleged gang members being sent to El Salvador. So we're going to stick up for both of those things because both are key to safety and opportunity for American families.
And Congresswoman, I understand the message about due process, but back to the question, is Leader Jeffries now discouraging Democrats, more House Democrats from heading down to El Salvador?
I have never heard Leader Jeffries say that. What I have heard him say is that we need to do both things. Again, be focused on those issues that our families talk about around the kitchen table, and also make sure that we are standing up for the rule of law and our constitutional and civil rights.
And briefly, I just want to put a point on this. Do you think more House Democrats should go to El Salvador?
You know, I think that whether we are traveling there or not, here's the important thing to remember. We have to continue to talk about what the strategy is here. And their playbook is a simple one. You take away the fundamental things from people. The basic needs that they require to get by and to get ahead, all to give a tax cut to the wealthiest, and that includes going around our Constitution and going around our laws if they perceive that people disagree with them. I think there was widespread support for deportation of people who have been convicted of crimes here who are not here legally. Nobody's arguing that. But what we're seeing is something very different and very sinister from this administration.
And Congresswoman, one of your colleagues filed articles of impeachment yesterday against President Trump. Really quickly, I want to play what one of your fellow leadership members, Pete Aguilar, what he said about impeachment yesterday. Let's listen.
Impeachment is at times a tool that can be used. This president is no stranger to that. He's been impeached twice, but we don't have any confidence that House and Senate Republicans would do their jobs, and so this is not an exercise that we're willing to undertake.
And that answer frustrated some Democrats, at least. So are you okay with ruling out impeachment at this juncture?
You know, we cannot get House Republicans to defend Social Security at this point. So I do agree with our chairman, Pete Aguilar, that it is so unlikely that they will actually impeach this president at this point in time. But here's what I can tell you, that we are committed to fighting every step of the way, and we don't take any tool off the table as we address, we're 100 days in to this administration, and the destruction that we are already seeing to people's lives is so vast and so deep, and in some areas, I am afraid will be generational, that we have to use every single tool we have and make sure that we are in this fight every day, blocking and tackling on behalf of the families who sent us here.
Congresswoman Katherine Clark of Massachusetts, we really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
And up next, courting controversy. President Trump accuses the courts of holding up his immigration plans. And Secretary of State Rubio appears to defy the Supreme Court, saying he would never tell a judge about whether the administration has asked for Kilmar Abrego Garcia's return. You're watching Meet the Press Now. And welcome back. During his cabinet meeting today, President Trump once again took aim at the judges he says are slowing down his immigration agenda.
We're expelling these monsters from our country rapidly and working with the Department of Justice. Pam, you're doing fantastic. Your people are amazing. We're having some judge problems. Everybody's reading. We're having some judges that don't like, killers, murderers being thrown out of the country. So I don't know what their problem is.
And it comes as we're tracking several developments in those deportation legal battles. In the case of the man mistakenly deported to El Salvador from Maryland, a federal judge lifted a week-long pause, ruling that the government must respond to questions about its efforts to bring Kilmar Abrego Garcia back to the U.S. Meanwhile, in Vermont, a judge ordered Columbia University student and pro-Palestinian protest organizer Mohsen Madawi be released on bail. He was detained earlier this month by immigration officials when he showed up for an interview as part of his naturalization process. Speaking outside the courthouse after his release today, Madawi struck a defiant tone.
We will not fear anyone because our fight is a fight for love, is a fight for democracy, is a fight for humanity. And I am saying it clear and loud. Yes. To President Trump and his cabinet. Yes. I am not afraid of you.
And joining me now is NBC News senior Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley and NBC News legal affairs reporter Gary Grumbach. Thank you both so much for joining me here on this cozy desk, a little smaller than usual. Exactly, a little chat here. Gary, I want to start with you. I want to get a reaction to what Secretary Rubio said today. He seemed to imply that he wouldn't answer the Supreme Court when it came to foreign policy. That's actually what he said when he was asked about it. What's next in that legal battle?
So we haven't heard much about this case this week at all, really. And that's because there's been a pause, as you mentioned, on the discovery in that case, which means no documents were being reviewed, no depositions were being done. That has now all restarted, and there's going to be a deadline of May 9th where all of that needs to get done so the judge can get to the bottom of whether or not the government in this case has decided to be with the Kilmer Abrego Garcia, whether or not they were facilitating his return back to the U.S.
Yeah, it's a lot to follow there as well. I do want to play something that President Trump said in his interview with ABC News yesterday. Let's listen.
It's about the rule of law. The order from the Supreme Court stands,
Came into our country illegally.
You could get him back. There's a phone on this desk.
I could.
You could pick it up, and with all the power of the presidency, you could call up the president of El Salvador and say, send him back right now.
And if he were the gentleman that you say he is, I would do that.
So, Gary, should DOJ lawyers be a little concerned that the president just said that he could bring Kilmer Abrego Garcia back, but he isn't? That goes against what they've been saying in court, right?
He's sort of saying the quiet part out loud here, right? Of course he could make that call. He's the president of the United States. He could make that ask. And doing so would actually be what the judge wants, which is to help facilitate bringing Abrego Garcia back. The fact that he's saying he's not doing that is something that I think is going to come up in court in the next few days.
And I do want to ask you something before I let you go. Another legal challenge. A judge appeared to be skeptical about the administration's position that there's an invasion at the southern border. What can you tell me about that?
So this all comes from a case involving refugee groups that were suing against the Trump administration's executive order that blocked the refugee resettlement program in the U.S. from going forward. As we've seen in so many of these cases, the judge said there's right ways to go about doing this, but just simply creating an executive order was not the way to do that. There's ways to go to Congress and get this done. There's rulemaking that can get done, and there's serious irreparable harm, according to the plaintiffs, that is happening right now. They mentioned a person living in Turkey that's in hiding, a person in Egypt that's facing torture, a person in Ecuador that's living in hiding because of domestic violence fears. These are all issues that are very serious and very imminent, and they want this overturned.
And Julie, I want to turn to you now on another legal case that we mentioned, that Columbia University student. Why did the judge order his release on bail?
Well, this was a judge in Vermont, and this is a case where the lawyers for Madawi really fought to keep this case in Vermont. The judge was very clear. He said that he's already suffered 2 weeks of harm, that he should not have been detained. But we're seeing this time and time again. I've seen 2 judges do it right near D.C. and Eastern District of Virginia, where they say you can't detain this person anymore. But it's really out of their hands whether or not the person could later be deported by an immigration judge.
Yeah, this doesn't mean he can't be deported, right? So what are you going to be watching in the next, what's the next step in this case? What are you going to be watching for?
Well, I want to see if they move him somewhere, because if you look at a very similar case, another Columbia student, another green card holder with Mahmoud Khalil, they moved him to Louisiana, even though his legal team has fought for that case to be heard in New Jersey. Same deal, but a judge there said they could be moved forward with deportation. That was an immigration judge. So it all comes down to where he goes next.
So do you think this is all, is this a setback for the administration's crackdown on student visas?
Well, I think the biggest setback, or rather total reversal, is the fact that now they're reinstating over 1,000 student visas that they revoked. So I'm a little confused just trying to read the tea leaves there myself. But they said today in a statement after he made those really, inflammatory remarks toward the Trump administration saying, I'm not scared of you. They said it is a privilege, not a right to have a student visa. So there's no clear, real drawback from their policy here. We know there's still a task force at DHS where they're combing through student social media. They could revoke for anything you've posted online or even a misdemeanor crime. But we'll see what they do going forward and whether or not this continues to be something this administration wants to put their political will behind.
Several battles that will continue to play out in the courts, and both of you will be watching. Gary Grumbach, Julie Ainsley, thank you so much. And after the break, the view from the former chief architect of Project 2025 on President Trump's first 100 days and why the next 100 days could be shaped by the courts. You're watching Meet the Press now. Stay with us. Welcome back. President Donald Trump has officially passed 100 days in office, and former head of Project 2025, Paul Dans, is pleased with the changes the president has made so far, touting the administration's steps toward undoing past liberal gains. And in a conversation with my NBC News colleague Alan Smith, Dans said, if Roosevelt had the New Deal, this is what I would think of as Trump's real deal. This is deconstructing the administrative state and walking back a lot of this progressive architecture that had been built up by FDR. Though the Trump campaign distanced itself from Project 2025 on the trail, the administration hired a number of the project report authors and matched a number of its policy positions. NBC News politics reporter Alan Smith joins me now. Alan, as I said, you just spoke to Paul Dans, the man who led Project 2025. How did he assess President Trump's first 100 days in office?
Well, Gabe, he was very, very excited about what he saw as the progress that Trump has made on a number of issues that were embodied in Project 2025. Of course, as you noted, there was a falling out between the campaign and Project 2025 last year as Trump was trying to seek distance from the project. So even now, Paul Dans was very careful to say, you know, these are President Trump's policies. This is not directly Project 2025 being implemented. But, I mean, it's easy to see that a lot of the policies in Project 2025 have major overlap with what Trump is doing right now. And Paul Dans is very excited.
Yeah, was it really a falling out then?
It was more a falling out between the campaign and Paul Dans. The campaign wanted the attention on their own policy agenda, and they felt that Dans was going a little too far in Project 2025. It was just bringing them attention that they didn't necessarily want.
And Alan, a lot of the Project 2025 aligned policies, they've been held up in court. Did he have any concerns about the court system?
I mean, this is what Dans thinks is the biggest issue for the next 100 days of the Trump administration. He says they need to get many more MAGA-aligned lawyers in the administration, you know, ASAP, to be fighting these court battles. He sees that as the ultimate fight. And what's really going to make the difference between whether a lot of these policies that were embodied in Project 2025 actually get implemented. You know, he said he's very excited about what's going on right now, but many of the policies that we're seeing are ultimately policy pronouncements in the form of executive orders, and he wants to make sure that they're actually implemented.
Alan Smith, thank you so much for your reporting. We appreciate it. And joining me now on set is Simone Sanders Townsend, former senior advisor to Vice President Harris and co-host of The Weeknight, coming soon on MSNBC, and also Republican strategist Matt Gorman. Thank you so much for joining me here on this smaller set than we're used to.
Really
so it's we're a little cozy.
It's cozy, Gabe.
It's tight up here. Okay.
All right. Well, I want to start with the economy, Matt. Earlier today, President Trump posted on social media trying to blame his predecessor on the economy. I want to put that up on the screen. I want to put two social media posts actually on the screen. You see right there? This was today. This is Biden's stock market, not Trump's. I didn't take over until January 20th. And then you rewind to January 2024. This is the Trump stock market because my polls against Biden are so good. So which is it? Will that argument work?
Yeah, credit among presidents for what the economy did on or didn't do on their watch is always a touchy subject. You had Obama at the DNC trying to take credit for Trump's economy before COVID. It's a mess. Look, I think this is it's going to be a tough argument to make because I think a lot of people view his tariffs or some of the economic policies as driving some of this. And especially also because I think there's a case to be made around lowering inflation, gas prices, and egg prices for President Trump. So I think it's always a delicate balance to make when you want some of the credit, but not all of the blame. It's always a tougher thing to have.
And what'd you make of that part of the ABC News interview where he tried to claim that he had warned Americans during the campaign that there would be a disruption? He didn't.
Well, no, he did, actually, because people have written about this, and the authors, reporters who talked about this said they would write about it. Jeff Stein of the Washington Post talked about that he would actually do some of these things that he did. So,
yes, the tariffs, yes, but he never warned Americans that there would be significant economic pain.
Short-term pain wasn't
Again, in there. I think I happen to believe some of the arguments that they made where they would do some of this stuff, and Democrats said it would be this. The American people voted for the other way. But I think we're getting a little hung up on that. Mm-hmm. I think tariffs and a lot of this stuff, he had a vision that he would do, right? And I think that is what he's executing on. And I think it's a unique thing because we're talking about the first 100 days. Usually when we talk about this, there's a second term that the president wants to attain. Okay. We're in a unique scenario where they didn't have to be that way now.
And Simone, I want to put up a number from the NPR Marist poll. Majority say the current economic situation is mostly a result of President Trump's policies. So he can blame Biden, but will people believe him?
Yeah, I don't think people will believe him. Now, I do think it's important to note that at the end of President Biden's term, GDP, it was record GDP growth, right? You heard folks from the Economic Council talk about it all the time. Wages, though, it didn't feel that way for people. Wages were flat, but
inflation had cooled.
Inflation had cooled, but it was still high. But it was, if you wanted to be us or Europe at that time, you would have wanted to be the United States. Our European counterparts were saying as such. But people polled at that time still didn't feel like their economic situation was great because of their everyday experience, right? Now, the difference here is people are going to blame President. So people were asking, like, well, why didn't President Biden get the credit? Well, because their everyday lives didn't feel like it. GDP and my wages aren't necessarily dovetailing. But for what has happened in this Trump economy, people are feeling it in their everyday lives. You can see the prices going. Your Shein costs more. Right. The Amazon costs more. The eggs have gone down. Shout out to the bird flu, getting under control a little bit. But the grocery prices are still high.
So how do Democrats capitalize on that? You heard my conversation earlier with Katherine Clark. What are Democrats to do here? Their message does not seem to be landing, at least not yet.
Well, I think that there's a couple things happening here. I think Democrats do have to point out, like, what is happening here, that a tariff is a tax, and a tax that the American people pay, and point out where the prices are going up. But Democrats also have to say what they would do if they were given the opportunity to be back in charge, particularly folks in the House. They have to talk about the threats to Medicaid and also what they would do to undergird and safeguard the program. They have to talk about Social Security. How will Democrats, if they become, instead of the ranking members, the leaders of the Oversight Committee, what is Jamie Raskin going to do, right? So these are, I think, things that you're going to start to hear a little bit more. But let's just be very clear. There are many things happening all at once, so it feels like Democrats are kind of drinking from a fire hose, and sometimes that makes it hard to pin down. But for the American people, it's very straightforward. Prices are up. And I still got to get to work. I still have to, buy food for my family. And that pain is not eased.
Matt, I want to play again what we heard from Trump today in the cabinet meeting on China and tariffs and children's toys. Let's listen.
They made $1 trillion with Biden, $1 trillion, even $1.1 trillion with Biden selling us stuff. Much of it we don't need. Somebody said, oh, the shelves are going to be open. Well, maybe the children will have $2 instead of $30, and maybe the $2 will cost a couple of bucks more.
Is that the best message for Republicans right now?
Normally, I would say that you're not going to lose votes going after China. However, I think what I would always encourage, whether it's politicians, business people, people I work with, you want to be focused on what the solution is. I think you don't want to be focusing on what the drawback is. Talk about what you can do, not necessarily what is not going to happen. I think Republicans would have a far more comfortable time defending, we're going to take on China, and here's what's going to happen. Here are the advantages of it. But I think talking about shortfalls, drawbacks, and leading with that is always tougher messaging.
I feel like there needs to be somebody in the White House talking to the president that has a real-life experience and connection to what's happening out there. The $2 instead of $30, nobody is getting $30. Maybe that happens at Trump's Christmas, right? That's a lot of dolls. But this idea that you can tell people, oh, the things that you're missing you don't need, that flies in the face of their everyday reality. So it not only feels out of touch, it sounds out of touch and tone deaf.
It was a mistake. You would agree that, at least in terms of messaging, the president shouldn't have gone there. At least describing it that way.
Here's what I would say. I think, look, they have been very effective. I think take Signalgate out of it, but they've been very effective on the foreign policy front when it comes to communicating on Ukraine and Russia. You have Waltz and everybody in Rubio singing from pretty much the same songbook on this. I think they need to get that similar effectiveness on the domestic policy. Besson is leading, and obviously Trump leads too. They just need to be getting unified on what they're saying domestic policy-wise.
Simone, Congress actually does have the authority to rein in some of these tariffs.
Do
you see anything? Do you see any point where they would actually use that authority?
Well, look, Mike Johnson, I think, did an Axios breakfast this morning, and he was asked about that very thing, and he essentially said he would step in. He does not feel the need to. So I don't think, as long as Mike Johnson is the Speaker of the House, Republicans are going to take a turn to try to take back Congress's power of tariffs, which, frankly, it is their constitutional authority. They gave it to Trump. They can take it back.
And I want to play something about someone who was caught on camera with the president yesterday, once again, Gretchen Whitmer. Let's take a look.
I want to thank Governor Gretchen Whitmer for bringing it also to our attention very strongly. And, you know, I'm not supposed to do that. She's a Democrat. They say, don't do that. Don't have her here. I said, no, she's going to be here. She's done a very good job, frankly, and she was very much involved with the Republicans. They worked together on saving it, and it was not easy. So I want to thank you very much, Gretchen. Good job. Thank you.
Simone, in the modern political landscape, did he just sink her chances in the presidential primary?
You know, she also went to the mic after that, which I thought was very interesting because the last time she was with Trump, she was in the Oval Office like this. So, you know, there's a change.
Okay, well, Matt, really quickly before we let you go, we have a new Atlanta Journal-Constitution poll out of Georgia that has Trump at 43% approval. It's close to what we've seen nationwide. What's your take on these poll numbers so far? Do you expect them to get lower or...
Well, if he wants a third term, it's going to be hard to win Georgia with those numbers. Look, candidly, Trump approval ratings, they matter in the context of the midterms. What matters to Georgia House members, not as much Trump.
Okay, well, thank you both so much for joining me. Simone Sanders and Matt, thank you so much.
Good to see you again.
I really appreciate it. Still to come, details on the Pentagon's decision to cut a women's program that President Trump and his cabinet championed in his first term. That story and the fallout is next. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. A Pentagon program to expand opportunities for women in national security spaces appears to be coming to an abrupt end. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth announced in a post on social media that he was, quote, proudly ending the Women, Peace, and Security program at the Pentagon that was signed into law by President Trump in his first term. Hegseth called it a woke initiative pushed by feminists and left-wing activists. But in reality, the bill that established the program was written by now Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, co-sponsored by now Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and now National Security Advisor Mike Waltz chaired the bipartisan Women, Peace, and Security Program caucus for several years. Notably, Secretary Rubio just touted the program earlier this month.
President Trump also signed the Women, Peace, and Security Act, a bill that I was very proud to have been a co-sponsor of when I was in the Senate. And it was the first comprehensive law passed in any country in the world, first law passed by any country anywhere in the world, focused on protecting women and promoting their participation in society.
And joining me now is NBC News senior national security correspondent Courtney Kube. Courtney, thanks for joining us. How is Secretary Hegseth justifying ending this program?
All we've heard so far out of him, Gabe, are these two tweets. Now, remember, he put out that first tweet saying that he was proudly ending the WPS program here at the Department of Defense, or at least defunding it as much as possible as the law would allow, with the ultimate goal of getting rid of it entirely. He used words like DEI and woke. He blamed it as part of, he blamed feminists for being a part of creating this. But as you mentioned, this was an initiative that was started in 2017 under the first Trump administration. Senior officials in the current Trump administrations were key to this even being enacted in the first place. And Gabe, Ivanka Trump, the president's daughter, was one of the ones who spoke about it when it was actually finally initiated. So about 2 hours after that first tweet, without any real warning or notice, the secretary tweeted again and seemed to walk back his earlier comments and said, look, WPS as a program is fine. It was perfectly appropriate. But the Biden team is the one who brought it, made it woke, and we're going to make sure it's no longer a part of the Department of Defense, Gabe.
Courtney Kube live for us at the Pentagon. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.